tonight's book that we're studying is not the book of Ephesians. It's not the book of Psalms. It is a very troubling book, to say the least. It's the book of Judges. And, even in chapter 20, I have something I'm marked in my Bible, underlined and stuff. But in Judges chapter 19, I have a sad face with tears because of what took place. I mean, that is very troubling, and we'll get to that as well. But when you read Judges chapter 2, it gives an overview of what the book is about, and how the people, they started one way, and then they cried to God. God delivered them, and this was like a continual cycle. And so with the book of Judges, it's not, like we think of a judge, not Judge Judy or Judge Mathis or something like that.
Not in the court.
Yeah, it's not in the court. And so, but this took place after Joshua died. Okay, so you guys remember Joshua, right?
Yes.
He was like Moses' understudy. He was Moses' successor.
Yes.
And we see that when Joshua died, or in the book of Joshua, you'll see that the children of Israel were trying to be obedient to God, and they were following after God, and they were trying to do the things that are pleasing in His sight. But it's very opposite, the direct opposite, in the book of Judges. And before we look at the Bible Project and things of that nature, can you tell me one story in the book of Judges before we get too far ahead that kind of make you scratch your head?
Well, there's several.
There's several.
The scratching your head.
Yeah.
Basically, all that stuff that happened in Benjamin. Where, and the fact that a Levite has a concubine and the Benjamites take advantage of her. Take advantage of her and kill her, and they're still in Israel and they're supposed to be hospitality, but it's like the opposite of that, and it's just craziness. And then on top of that, like we were saying, the Levite chopping her up and sending her to the 12 tribes.
Sending her to the 12 tribes.
Yeah, my head scratches every time. I'm always scratching my head on that one, no matter how many times I read it.
Yeah, and Judges is one of those books that should come with a warning. Like explicit lyrics, or rated R or X-rated, or it's one of those books that when you read, you're like, this is what can happen when you get far away from God.
Okay.
Yeah, you get on this slippery slope. God had told, as me and the pastor were chopping it up, God had told Israel to drive them out.
Yes, He did.
To drive out the Canaanites. And they didn't drive them out like they were supposed to, and they had to suffer the consequences of that. You don't want to. Oh,
in front of the camera.
We have our camera not seeing. And so it shows you how far you can get away from God. When you neglect the things of God and you don't listen and obey God. And so. Can anyone name one of the judges? Anyone can name one of the judges? Samson?
Deborah.
Me and the pastor said that's probably one of the better ones. Gideon. Jephthah. And the pastor, now you had something special there for Jephthah. You were discussing Jephthah. You want to bring it up and you want to wait. It's up to you.
I mean, I didn't, the idea of Jephthah's daughter and him making a promise that she would be sacrificed to the Lord, the first one that he saw, and that kind of thing. And it always troubled me because this is a leader of God's people.
Yeah.
And why didn't he just say no? But it just shows how far they had gone. They were treating God like a Canaanite God and sacrificing his daughter, and God doesn't accept that, so it certainly isn't acceptable. But she died.
Yes.
She died. Yeah. Yeah. And so we're going to look at some some troubling scenes here in the book of
Yes.
Judges. And, it's far out there.
Yeah.
And so in the book of Judges, as far as the author, it's not mentioned who the author is. As far as with Jewish tradition, they think it could have been Samuel or maybe one of his understudies, one of the prophetic students that was with Samuel. So they're not for sure, but it could have been, probably Samuel, but we don't know. And so the book of Judges, it means to deliver or liberate. And, that's what God ultimately does for us. He's, our deliverer. He liberates us. But here we see there's one specific theme that continues to pop up in the book of Judges.
Okay.
It says, in those days, y'all remember that? There was no king in Israel, and they did what was right in their own eyes.
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone. Can you imagine being a kid and left at home and, the parents give you free reign, do whatever you wanted, and say, this is what's right for me, for me and for Karim and his sisters. Hey, this is what's right. We're not listening to what parents say. This is what I feel is right. And so the children of Israel, that's what they said they did that which was right in their own eyes.
So you didn't do that when you was a kid?
We had breaks in there.
Man, my mother and father left the house. Shoot, man, I had free reign. They gonna be gone for a while.
Now when they would go to work, then, when they would go to work, then it was free reign. But then when they come back, we had to straighten back up.
Now, maybe you guys have already covered this, but why is it that Joshua didn't pick a leader?
Very good. Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Okay.
I don't know because so Moses had a successor, Joshua.
Yeah.
When Joshua died, it's like it was just free game. There was no one to help lead out.
As smart as Joshua was, it's like.
And so you have Caleb and Joshua brought back the Minority Report. So Caleb was a good leader just like Joshua. His heart was after God. And God provided Joshua for Moses. But you got to lack. There's a vacuum there. Because there's not a leader.
Yeah. Why it wasn't Caleb, I don't know.
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
I had another head scratcher.
Okay.
Micah and the idols and the personal priest.
Yeah.
And then the priest gets stolen by the tribe of Dan. And along with his idols and all the other stuff.
Yeah, along with the
That
idols.
was another one. I was like, what is happening?
Yes, it is. And so what we'll do is we'll watch the Bible Project, and then we'll go into some stories here so that you can kind of see it for yourself. And so let me.
Some weird stuff.
Yeah, bad.
Even.
As the pastor said on Sunday's lesson, God has some bad kids.
Did I say that?
Yeah, he did.
Who's your father?
Who's your father?
That was really good question.
Surely not a Gilcrease.
And so this is about 7.5 minutes, gives a good overview of the book of Judges.
The book of Judges. So remember, after Joshua led the tribes of Israel into the promised land, he called them to be faithful to their covenant with God by obeying the commands of the Torah. And if they do this, they will show all the other nations what God is like. So Judges begins with the death of Joshua and basically tells the story of Israel's total failure. The book's name comes from the type of leaders Israel had in this period. Before they had any kings, the tribes were all governed by these judges. Now, don't think of a courtroom. These were regional, political, military leaders, more like a tribal chieftain. And you need to be warned, the book of Judges is very disturbing and violent. It tells the tragic tale of Israel's moral corruption, of its bad leadership, and basically how they become no different than the Canaanites. But this sad story is also meant to generate hope for the future. And you can see this in how the book's designed. There's a large introduction that sets the stage for Israel's failure as they don't drive out the remaining Canaanites. Then the large main section of the book has stories about the growing corruption of Israel's judges. And the progression here shows how Israel's leaders go from pretty good to okay to bad to worse. The concluding section is really disturbing. It shows the corruption of the people of Israel as a whole. So let's dive in, and we can explore each part a bit more. The opening section begins with the tribes of Israel in their territories in the Promised Land. And while Joshua defeated some key Canaanite towns, there was still a lot of land to be taken and lots of Canaanites living in those areas. And so chapter 1 gives a long list of Canaanite groups and towns that Israel just failed to drive out from the land. Now, remember, the whole point of driving out the Canaanites was to avoid their moral corruption and their way of worshiping the gods through child sacrifice. God had called Israel to be a holy people, and that does not happen. Chapter 2 describes how Israel just moved in alongside the Canaanites and adopted all their cultural and religious practices. And it's right here that the story stops. For nearly a whole chapter, the narrator gives us an overview of everything that's about to happen in the body of the book. This part.
And so that's chapter 2 where he gives us narration. So if you want to go back and read that, but and then remember the Canaanites, God told them to drive them out, but they didn't drive them out, and now this is what takes place.
Okay. Yeah.
Part of Israel's history, the narrator says, was a series of cycles moving in a downward spiral. So Israel became like the Canaanites, and so they would sin against God. So God would allow them to be conquered and oppressed by the Canaanites, and eventually the Israelites would see the error of their ways and repent. So God would raise up a deliverer, a judge from among Israel who would defeat the enemy and bring about an era of peace. But eventually Israel would sin again and it would all start over. This cycle provides the literary design and flow for the next main section of the book. It gets repeated for each of the 6 main judges whose stories are told here. Now the stories of the first 3 judges, Othniel, Ehud, and Deborah, they are epic adventures. They're also extremely bloody stories. Either the judge themselves or people who help the judge, they defeat their enemies and deliver the people of Israel. The stories about the next 3 judges are longer, and they focus in on the character flaws of the judges, which get increasingly worse. So Gideon, he begins pretty well. He's a coward of a man, but he eventually comes to trust that God can save Israel through him. And so he defeats a huge army of Midianites with only 300 men carrying torches and clay pots. But Gideon has a nasty temper, and he murders a bunch of fellow Israelites for not helping him in his battle. And then it all goes downhill from there. He makes an idol from the gold that he won in his battles. And then after he dies, all of Israel worships the idol as a god, and the cycle begins again. The next main judge is Jephthah, who's something of a mafia thug living up in the hills. And when things get really bad for Israel, the elders come to him begging for his help. And Jephthah was a very effective leader. He won lots of battles against the Ammonites, but he was so unfamiliar with the God of Israel, he treats him like a Canaanite god. He vows to sacrifice his daughter if he wins the battle. This tragic story, it shows just how far Israel has fallen. They no longer know the character of their own God, which leads to murder and to false worship. The last judge, Samson, is by far the worst. His life began full of promise, but he has no regard for the God of Israel. He was promiscuous, violent, and arrogant. He did win brutally strategic victories over the Philistines, but only at the expense of his own integrity, and his life ends in a violent rush of mass murder. Now, a quick note here. You'll notice a repeated theme in the main section of the book, that at key moments, God's Spirit will empower each of these judges to accomplish these great acts of deliverance. Now, the fact that God uses these really screwed up people doesn't mean he endorses all or even any of their decisions. God is committed first and foremost to saving his people, but all he has to work with is these corrupt leaders. And so work with them he does. This whole section is designed to show just how bad things have gotten. You can't even tell the Israelites and the Canaanites apart anymore. And that's just the leaders. The final section shows Israel as a whole hitting bottom. There are 2 tragic stories. here, and they are not for the faint of heart. They're structured by this key line that gets repeated 4 times at the close of the book. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. The first story is about an Israelite named Micah who builds a private temple to an idol. And that gets plundered by a private army sent from the tribe of Dan. So they come and they steal everything, and then they go and burn down the peaceful city of Laish and murder all of its inhabitants. It's a horrifying story. When Israel forgets its God, might makes right. The final story of the book is even worse. It's a shocking tale of sexual abuse and violence, which all leads to Israel's first civil war. It's very disturbing. And that's the point. These stories are meant to serve as a warning. Israel's descent into self-destruction is a result of turning away from the God who loves them and saved them out of slavery in Egypt. And now Israel needs to be delivered again from themselves. The only glimmer of hope in this story is found in this repeated line in the last part of the book. It actually forms the last sentence of the story. Israel has no king. And so the stage is set for the following books to tell the origins of King David's family, the book of Ruth, and also the origins of kingship itself in Israel, the book of 1 Samuel. But the story of Judges has value as a tragedy. It's a sobering explanation of the human condition, and ultimately it points out the need for God's grace to send a king who will rescue his people. And that's the book of Judges.
All right, so that's the book of Judges. Okay, and so when we look at that, it says it got to a point where it was hard to recognize Israel from the Canaanites. They were doing the exact same thing as the Canaanites. And there was a reason why God told them to, they're not to intermarry with them, but they decided to go ahead and do that. But let's look at, let's go ahead and jump into this one, Judges chapter 19. And, they've already gave the warning that this is some crazy stuff here that's going on in the book of Judges. I was going to talk about Samson, but we're pretty familiar with Samson. Let's look at Judges chapter 19 and verse 22. Let's start with verse 22. This is a story about a Levite and his concubine. And, they're going to a city. They're looking for a place to stay. And this is what takes place. Okay, let's go to verse 22. Who would like to read verse 22 in verse 23?
Now as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial. Is that his name, Belial?
I have a different version than yours, but it probably says, yeah.
Beset the house round and about and beat at the door and spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring forth the men that came into the house, that we may know him.
Okay.
23.
Mm-hmm.
And the man, the master of the house, went out unto them and said to them, now my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, say that this man is come to my house. Do not do this folly.
Yeah. And so,
Folly.
yeah, folly. Yeah, and it says here in the English Standard Version, it says worthless men.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it say in the King James? Oh, okay.
I think that was
Oh, that was King James. Okay, and it says doing this vow thing. So here we have a man with his concubine. They're looking for a place to stay. No one opens the door for them, and we have this older gentleman who I believe he came in from the field or from work or something like that. And then when he comes in, he sees this couple there, and he knows the city. He says, "You guys need to come in. Whatever you do, don't stay out here in the square." And so he's warning them, like, "Hey, you need to come in." And so they come into his house. They have a good time. They're eating. They're fellowshipping one with another. And then all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, right? Like, who's at the door? And who's knocking at the door here? The men of the city, right? And so, pretty good guys? No. It says worthless men, vile men, and they ask a question, not like, you got some sugar, you got some flour, you know, that's not what they wanted here. It's the same when you go back to Genesis, when they said, when the angels came,
That's right.
and they said, hey, this fresh meat, let's bring them out. we got to know them. And so, this is Bible. This is Bible.
That's right.
And so they said, okay, so they say here in verse 22, bring out the man who came into your house that we may know him. Yeah, in a sexual way. Right. And so in verse 23, what does the master of the house, the old man, say to him?
That's wicked.
Yeah. No, we don't do that. Right? So just imagine if someone came to your house, you have a visitor there, they say, hey, bring out such and such. Like, whoa, what type of request is that? Just think how this is going here. And then when you see verse 24, who would like to read verse 24 and 24?
Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out now. Violate them and do with them what seems good to you. But against this man, do not do this outrageous thing.
Okay, so I don't know how we got to that point. This is bad. and just because this happened, that doesn't mean that God endorsed this, this stuff that's taking place here. They say, okay, so the master of the house, he says, you know what? Don't violate the man, violate the woman. Okay. And so this is how, they treated or looked at women in those days. In certain parts of the world, they still do. It says, violate them, but don't violate him. Well, why would you think he would say something like that? Is it, how do we get to that point where we're trying to say, okay, not this, but this? Was that better than that?
Apparently it seemed like it was more egregious for them to take the man.
That was his daughter.
Oh, yeah.
Take my virgin daughter, and matter of fact, take his concubine.
That's the same thing the Canaanites said in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yes.
So like you said, you can't even tell the difference between the groups anymore because they're saying and doing the same things.
But see, in that country, they had an obligation to protect their guests.
Right.
And they would go through any length to protect their guests that's in the household, even giving up their daughters in order to protect them.
Not the male guests, apparently, because the concubines are guests too. So just the males.
I think the main thing to look at that, I would look at it, the man just was scared to speak up. He had more than what he can take on, so he gonna give it to the woman.
Okay.
He gonna
He's scared for his life.
The depravity, the depravity of the people. You have to understand that none of these decisions were made by prayer or talking to the Lord about it. And you won't find in Judges where somebody said, I prayed and asked the Lord, what should I do? Okay? Because everybody is doing what's right in their own. Everybody has become their own God. So in their own decision making, Sodom and Gomorrah, it would be better for them to have, and we're all adults here, sex with a woman than to have sex with a man. That's how vile they were. That entire decision and all of the decisions made in Judges, they weren't made by the leading and the guiding of God.
Come on now.
They had gone so far away from God till they thought God was just like the Canaanite gods, and the only way you could please him is to do the things they were doing with the Canaanites. That's the issue. Disobedience brought it in.
Disobedience, yes. And if you remember, much different from when Joshua,
you better believe it.
What's going on with Joshua leading
You
out.
better believe it.
Joshua dies off. There's a hole there.
Yeah.
My question when I look at this book is, where are the priests?
Mm.
Which would correlate to where's the church?
Where's
the church? Because we're facing a similar situation. Where's the church standing for
You
righteousness?
better believe it.
Yeah.
You better believe it.
Ooh,
And when you read it,
The
Malika,
story is about a Levite.
yeah.
Here's the priest. That's where the church is.
Here's the church.
The Levites were corrupt too.
Right, he's in the middle of the mess.
The Levites are right in the middle of it, just like Aaron was right in the middle of it.
When you don't seek God's face, you do what feels right, you're going down.
Where's the faith? I think that'd be the main.
Yeah.
Where's the faith?
Yeah, in God.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so here we say, okay, violate this group. Leave this fellow alone here. And then it says, okay, who wants to read verse 25? It gets worse, I'm just letting you know.
But the man would not hearken to him, so the man took his concubine and brought him forth unto them, and they knew her, and abused her all the night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go.
Okay, so they did whatever they wanted to with her. Okay, so it says all night. And I don't know how many men it was, but it was bad. Okay?
And note, it says concubine.
Okay.
Something less than a wife.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, verse 26. Okay, so they did this to her all night. They let her go. Then who wants to pick up on verse 26?
Then came the woman in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house, where her Lord was, till it was light.
Okay, so she collapses there. Okay, till it was light. And then verse 27. Who wants to read that one?
And her Lord rose up in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way. And behold, the woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold.
Okay, so bad shape. You know, this is one of these stories where it's a head scratcher. It's here in Scripture, but it shows how far we can go when we get away from God. You know, it's a slippery slope. And one thing you have this compromise and then that compromise, and all of a sudden you're way down here. You're so far from God. Okay, you want to read the next verse too? 28. Yeah.
And he said unto her, Up, and let us be going. But I answered, then the man took her up upon the mast, and the man rose up and gat him unto his place.
Yeah.
The word in my Bible is GAT, gat him.
Okay, so you see where this is going? I mean, this is bad. I mean,
terrible.
this is like I said, a terrible story in Scripture. For me, like one of the worst. You have daughters and cousins and stuff.
But you have to look at today too.
Yeah.
This looking at this reminds me of what's going on
Huh.
right now.
You think that's right?
Look at everything that's going on in the world right now.
Yes.
There is so much evilness in
Yes.
this world.
Yes.
And it's because a lot of people have strayed away
No
from the
question.
word.
That's right.
Yes.
No question.
Yes.
And see, God gives us over to our own depravity.
Yes.
See, as we read the Bible, this is the holy book. This is the love of God, how God expresses himself to us. So how can we take in this horrible stuff? A lot of people, when I try to talk to them about Christ and talk to them about God, especially my uncle, Vietnam vet, and he was there when they burned bodies in heaps and all that kind of stuff. And he has a hard time because he said, if God can prevent this kind of tragedy, he can't understand how he can be loving and then this kind of stuff happen. But the truth is, if God destroyed everybody that ever sinned, he'd have to kill everybody.
Everybody.
He'd have to eliminate the whole. And he did that once before. And he said, I won't do that again. I'm going to do something different this time. And so he's long suffering with this hideous stuff. And let me tell you, men and women are still just as depraved as they were in the day of Judges. You are absolutely right.
Yes.
Yep.
We're headed down the same road.
Yes. And we talked about too, Pastor, as far as what they were doing to their children.
Yeah.
To the babies. They were taking the babies and bashing them against the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, don't believe me? That's Psalms 137 verse 8. And so, they were acting just like the Canaanites.
That's right.
Okay.
And then they were acting like they did not know God. Maybe at this point they did know God. Yeah. And so they had been led by, Moses. They've been led by Joshua, and now they're sacrificing to other gods. Now they're building all these graven images, and they're kidnapping people. All kind of weird stuff that's taking place in Judges. Okay, the next verse.
Let me say this before you go to that. And the sad thing to say about it is happening right today. A lot of people, and it's bad, especially they led by each other instead of walking with the word. Mm-hmm. And that's why we in the shape we in. And a lot of times we get tied down with each other and forget about the Lord. It's sad, but it's true.
Yes. And so, this story continues to go down, spiral down. Malika, go ahead and read the next one.
Even before that.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 28. The fact that he opens the door and sees her after he sent her out for abuse, his first thing was get up.
Get up.
You need to get up. He hadn't even realized the woman was dead. So, verse 29. And when he entered his house, he took a knife and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. You want to continue?
Yep.
And all who saw it said, such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak.
Yeah, when you see that sentence says, we never seen anything like that. It seems like we continue to say that we never seen it this bad. And then next week we never seen it this bad. It keeps getting worse and worse. To cut her up.
The Bible say though.
To cut her up in pieces like that. I mean, that's to send her out to the 12 tribes. And so this is what happens when we get away from God. So when you look at the book of Judges, I mean, there's a lot of other stories that took place. The worst judge. Who would you think would be the worst judge in all of this? I'll say that he had 7 lots. Malika has 2.
Samson, yeah, he said he was the worst.
Samson was the worst. Yeah, he was a Nazarite, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, you about to say something?
I was thinking Jephthah. What was his name?
Yeah, he's not far behind. But Samson, Samson didn't like the Sunday school girls, right? Samson wasn't going for Sunday school. Boy. I mean,
Hosea didn't marry the Sunday school girl either.
No.
That's true. I'm good thinking about it.
And so Samson, it says here in verse, I'm going to say Samson 16. Judges chapter 16. We will look at this and then we'll close here in a minute. But you know what? Okay, I'm going to go to 15 first.
Yeah.
Because the 15,
16.
15 and 16, because Samson is like he gets offended here. He gets his feelings hurt, he gets offended. He wants to, because there's someone he wants to marry. I guess, did he marry her? And then the father gave her, he said, I'm giving to your buddy, I'm giving to your homeboy. You take the little sister. Samson didn't like that. Mm-hmm. And Samson does something that I know God didn't approve of. Mm-hmm. Can anyone tell me what he did? It's to deal with some foxes here.
And they ran through the field and burned down all the
Yeah, it says 300. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he was able to do that. We're talking about the logistics of catching 300 foxes or jackals or whatever it was. And he lit the tails on fire. And, that's brutality for the animals. They suffer. And so, but they went through the field of the Philistines and burnt down the corn. That had to be a heavy price that they paid for that because, agriculture, they suffer because of that. And so Samson does this thing. I don't think God approved of that. I mean, that's very petty what Samson did there. And then in the next chapter, it says in Judges 16:1, it says, Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a what?
Prostitute.
Saw a prostitute. So he didn't give a Bible study. Nothing like that. He wasn't trying to put oil on her head or trying to anoint. He was doing some other stuff. And he says he went into her. And so the Gazites were told Samson has come here, and they surrounded the place, set an ambush for him all night. And so Samson, it goes on to say how he got out of it. And so then it goes to verse 4, and we are introduced to a woman named who? Delilah. And the Philistines, they offer her some money. Said, we need to figure out how to get Samson. He's taken us all out. No, he was a killer. And so what did Delilah do? She says, if you love me, tell me how to I don't know how to kill you.
He lied to her twice about how to kill him and stuff. So.
Yeah, would you? I would. Oh, come on. But yeah, she said, you don't love me? I thought you loved me, Samson. I want to kill you. You're not helping me out here. and so finally it gets to the point where Samson relents, right? Go ahead, Malik.
She nagged him nearly to death about it.
What now?
I said she nagged him nearly to death about it.
Yes.
And so he got tired of it.
Yeah, he got tired of hearing the nagging, complaining. Like, man, here, let me tell you how to kill me.
Man, Samson's weak.
Samson's weak.
Weak, man.
Samson laid on the lap.
Man, Samson's weak, man. Just keep saying no.
Keep saying no. He got tired of Delilah crying about it.
I always thought it was strange that he could even entertain it, considering she always tried whatever
she tried
said.
it.
Yeah.
So why would you even continue?
Yeah.
It was always baffled me.
I know why.
Why?
Why?
This is church, I can't say.
You wasn't thinking with the right brain.
Well, why don't we just say she was fine?
I think he was arrogant.
There's no question.
He could get himself
Ego.
out of anything.
Out of anything.
And he saw it then. But I'm telling you, pride will bring you down.
Yes. And what happened with Samson the last time, they shaved his head, he thought it was going to be just like every other time. It says he did not know. Okay, let's go to that verse.
Where
Judges 15 and verse 14.
Yeah.
Someone read that for me. Oh, no, hold on a second. Let me see here. That's not the right one. Yeah, 16.
Verse 20 and 21.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You want to read that, sister?
Then she called Samson, the Philistines are coming. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go about this before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. That's NIV.
He did not know that the Lord left him. So that's what Sister Nina said. He was arrogant. He said,
no question.
She did it the other times, but even though I gave her the right recipe this time, I'm just going to shake it off. Couldn't shake that one off.
Just like Sister Nina said, pride, y'all took the main one out.
Yeah,
and he's in the church, so I won't say who said, but they said love will make you do right, love will make you do wrong. It was all about love.
Sister Beverly.
Anyway, he didn't heed to the warning of his mother and father.
That's true.
That's his first mistake.
That's right. He was very arrogant. He said, you go get that woman. She's who I want.
That's
I
right.
tried to warn him. He tried to warn him.
That's right.
No
Try
question.
to warn him, and then
It just went downhill.
No question.
downhill. And after he got his head shaved, he had to lose his eyes.
Well, the part of the Nazarite vow, the Nazarite covenant says you're never supposed to have metal or have your head shaved. That's why his hair was never cut.
Right.
But that was a sign that he was God's covenant man to lead Israel. And once that goes away, then the Lord said, I'm not with you anymore.
All right.
You see?
But didn't he tell his mother
Yeah.
before she had him, don't drink wine, don't do
Oh, yeah.
this?
That's the vow. That's the Nazarite vow.
All
That's
the
right.
seeds were set.
Yeah. Yeah, that's who he was.
And he had his eyes put out. So now he's in prison. You know, he's God's man, right? He was the judge of Israel. Now he's in prison, and he's being made fun of, you know, being made sport of. And these are the Philistines. They're just cackling it up. And so I don't know how long he was in prison. Go ahead.
Did they blind him?
Yeah. They took his eyes out. Yeah, they took both of his eyes out. Can you imagine that?
Well, I thought about that, a man who was a soldier way back in the 20s, and they had to end up helping him because he was down south somewhere, and the white people put his eyes out. And they had a big story about him and gave him recognition when he came back from the war.
Yeah, and Pastor, there was a story in the Bible. I can't seem to think of it, but they were saying, "Hey, we're gonna take over you. We're gonna take one of your eyes out." What story was that? As far as
was it the one where they shaved half their beards too?
Yeah, it was a weird story.
I don't remember.
It was very weird.
Yeah.
They would let them go if they would mutilate a part of their body.
Yeah.
I thought it was the.
And then they said, "We'll come back in the morning," because basically God said, "We're going to do this."
And Saul came.
Saul, yeah, this was Saul.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why when Saul was killed, they risked their lives. I can't pronounce the word. They risked their lives because Saul came and delivered them, and they didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right, yes. And so here in this, you know, in Judges, there are some stories we left out. You know, there's Jephthah, there's Micah, there's a lot of stuff in there. And so I encourage you to read it. You know, you don't have to always watch TV. It's right here in the scriptures. A lot of things took place here that God did not approve of. But it shows the type of God that we serve, because God was seeking to deliver them, but they went right back into the law. And so it shows us what happens when we don't follow what God has set up for us. We can become arrogant, like Samson, and then have our eyes put out. And so, but he did. His hair started to grow back, and so I don't know how long it took for his hair to grow back. I don't think it grew at full strength, you know, the 7 locks, and so. But
and his eyesight didn't come back.
Yes, eyesight didn't.
Because he prayed and asked the Lord to give him the strength. He felt to the pillars of the city.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the strength did come back.
Yeah. And that's troubling to me. Here's why this is troubling to me.
Okay.
Because Samson's prayer, he asked the Lord, he said, "Let me kill more of my enemies in my death than I did while I was alive."
Wow.
Yeah.
And here's what troubles me. It sounds like to me, God gave him the okay to take his own life.
That's what he just said. Brother Hunt just said he committed suicide.
That's why it's troubling to me.
Okay, well, let me say this.
Hold on a minute, Rick.
After you get through.
And then, with all that being said, where do we find Samson?
Hebrews 11.
Hebrews 11.
And the reason is he had faith enough, even though he had sinned, to believe God would have mercy on him.
No question.
I love you, Lord. Oh, I love you, Lord. Oh, I love you.
So
I don't understand it all.
So let's go there. Let's go there as we close out. Hebrews 11 in verse 30. I'm gonna start at verse 31. So the writer of Hebrews, I don't know who it was, but some say Paul or some others, but Hebrews, I love Hebrews. But it says, "By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies." Then it says, "What more should we say then? For the time would fail me to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of the fire, escaped the sword, edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight." And so it puts Samson in that group.
Amen. Yeah, he did.
And so it shows the type of God that we serve. And so I encourage you to continue to read on with your Bible plans. I believe the next book we're looking at is the book of Ruth. And so there's a lot in the book of Ruth. Any final commentary before we close out, Brother Ray Dunn?
Well, what I was going to say, when you was at 10 and the pastor said they troubled him, the first thing would come to my mind was when I would pray with something and it troubled me, don't lean on your own understanding. The Lord don't think like we do. Only God knows what we need. And that's why we should trust in the Lord when things get tough.
And don't try to get back at your enemies by tying some tails together, light it on fire, run. Don't do that, guys. You will find yourself in trouble.
It's just shocking how bad humans can be to one another, how depraved
the human heart.
A heart away from God can get, and the wildness of the imagination and being traveling like I have and being the places I've been. I mean, it's like being in biblical time. It's people going out sacrificing animals at night and burning them and praying to pagan gods and doing all of this marching around. I mean, we see this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's 2023. And you wouldn't think it would still be going on, but